Hello, this is Pastor Stephen Anderson from Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. Today with Lesson 20, we're going to start actually getting a little bit more advanced. Instead of just cherry-picking easy verses as we've been doing in these lessons, we're now going to take a whole passage and just work our way through that passage and try to deal with just about everything that comes up grammatically and all the vocabulary that comes up. And we're going to start with John chapter 1. Now, the reason that I want to start with John chapter 1 is that the book of John is easier to understand than a lot of the other books in the Greek New Testament. Not all of the books of the New Testament are equivalent when it comes to how hard they are to read. For example, in 2 Peter chapter 3, Peter said that there are many things in Paul's epistles that are hard to be understood. And I've just noticed that when I'm reading my Greek New Testament, the epistles of Paul use bigger words and more difficult language than, for example, the books that John wrote. So the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, Revelation, are just easier to read. It goes the same in English. It's funny, sometimes people will want to attack the King James Bible saying that it's too hard to understand. They'll usually show you verses from Paul's epistles and say, look at these verses, look how hard they are to understand in the King James. Well, in reality, they're just hard to understand even in the original Greek. So obviously, if you're going to translate something that's difficult in Greek into English, it's going to translate into difficult English. And when you translate an easy book like the book of John into English, the English is going to be easier to read. Think about how simple John 1 is in English. You know, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. It uses very basic language throughout the book of John. So John's a good place to start if you want to read the Greek New Testament and memorize the Greek New Testament. So what I want to do is just go through John chapter 1 verse by verse. We already covered verse 1 back in lesson 4. So if you haven't already memorized verse 1, then go back and watch lesson 4 and you'll be ready to move on to today's lesson, lesson 20, where we're going to deal with John chapter 1 verse 2. And again, with these lessons, I strongly encourage you to write out the verses and memorize the verses. I'm going to get a little bit more advanced now with the lessons going forward, so be sure that you've mastered lessons 1 through 19 before you try to tackle lessons 20 and onward. So here we have John chapter 1 verse 2, which is also a pretty simple verse. Ούτος in en archi pros ton theon. Now, just to remind you what John 1:1 said, it said, en archi in o logos, ke o logos in pros ton theon, ke theos in o logos. And that verse says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 2 says in English, the same was in the beginning with God. Very short verse. The same was in the beginning with God. The same is this word ούτος that we're going to be talking about today. In means was, en archi, in beginning or in the beginning, pros ton theon. Pros means with, ton theon, the God or with God. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about en archi pros ton theon because I already talked about that in lesson 4 when we went over verse 1. So the word that I really want to focus in on today is this word ούτος. Now, ούτος is what we would call a demonstrative pronoun, and it's usually going to be translated into English as this. So the word this in English, in Greek, would be expressed as ούτος. So literally what this is saying is this was in the beginning with God. And obviously it sounds better the way the King James has it translated, the same, meaning this one that we just referred to in verse 1, the same was in the beginning with God. So the demonstrative pronoun this, or in Greek ούτος, it can act as a pronoun, as it is here, where it's replacing a noun. And the noun that it is replacing is o logos, or the Word. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same, referring to the Word, was in the beginning with God. This, meaning the Word, was in the beginning with God. So ούτος here is acting as a pronoun. But ούtos can also act as an adjective. For example, if I were to say this man, man is the noun, and this is describing which man we're talking about. This man. That is a pronoun, but in that case it's actually working as an adjective. because it's this man. So in Greek, that would be ούτος ο άνθρωπος, this man. Whereas here, it's just standing alone as a pronoun. Now, I've drawn a chart here underneath the verse. And it would be great to memorize this chart. And it might seem kind of overwhelming, just because it's a lot to memorize just for one word, this, the demonstrative pronoun. But honestly, it's really worth your time and investment in memorizing this chart, because there's a pattern in this chart that's going to come up in a lot of other words in Greek and other demonstrative pronouns. Now, let me just help you understand this chart. What I've done here is I've taken the word ούτος and put it in all the different forms that you're going to see it. First of all, when ούτος is either replacing or modifying a masculine noun, then we're going to use this column. This is the masculine column right here. So these are all the masculine forms of ούτος. But when ούtος is going to replace a feminine noun, then we're going to need to use the feminine column right here. These are the 8 different ways that ούtος ends up in feminine. So for example, if we wanted to use the accusative case here, and we wanted to say this parable, then we would say taftin tin parabolin, this parable. Okay, so then we'd use that word. And if we're in the nominative case, masculine, we're going to use this word right here, ούτος. So we've got our 3 columns here, masculine, feminine, and then of course, what's the last column going to be? Neuter. And the way I've drawn this chart is the way that you'll find this chart in pretty much any Greek textbook. Then if we go down the left side of our chart here, we have, of course, the nominative case here. And then what comes next? The genitive case, the dative case, and the accusative case. So again, if we want an accusative feminine, boom, that's our word. If we want a neuter genitive, boom, that's our word, okay? And you say, okay, well, what's the bottom half of the chart? Well, this is all the plurals, okay? So everything here is singular. And everything down here is plural. So here we've got our singular masculines, feminines, neuters. These are the different cases, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. And you should be familiar with this chart anyway from when we talked about adjectives and we talked about alithinos. So that's how this chart works. I'm going to get rid of these indicators on the side just so that the board doesn't get too cluttered. And I would strongly recommend that you at home watching the video write out this chart and write this chart on a piece of paper for yourself as you watch the video, and then definitely commit this chart to memory so that you can write it out without looking at the video. So again, we know what this chart means. We've got all of our singulars up here, we got our plurals here, masculine, feminine, neuter, and then we've got here, of course, nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. So let's read off these words so that we can get the pronunciation right. First, starting in this masculine column, we've got ούτος, tutu, tuto, tuton. And of course, we're using modern Greek pronunciation. Then in the feminine column, we've got afti, taftis, tafti, taftin. Then in the neuter column, we've got tuto, tutu, tuto, tuto. Then let's move down to the plurals. Masculine plural is going to be uti. Then we'll move down to the genitive, tuton, tutis, tutus. Move to the feminine column, afte, tuton, taftes, taftas. And then in the neuter column, plurals of course, tafta, tuton, tutis, tafta. Now, let's go over some things that will help us as we memorize this chart and understand this chart. You say, why would I memorize this chart? Well, when you're reading the Greek New Testament, you're going to see these words a lot. And if you have this chart memorized, when you see these words, it's going to help you know a lot about what the meaning is in English. For example, if I were to see the word taftes here, well, then I know that whatever it's replacing or modifying is feminine. I know it's plural. And I know that it's in the dative case. So that tells me a lot right there. Now, here are some things to help you memorize this. First of all, I want you to notice that these two words are the same. When we get down to the genitive column in the genitive singular, notice that the masculine and the neuter are the same. Tutu and tutu. Do you see that? And then also notice that in the dative, the masculine and the neuter are the same. So that's just one less word that you have to memorize when you realize that those are the same. So that should help. The other thing I want you to notice is that in the neuter singular, both the nominative and the accusative are the same. And then the next thing I want you to see is down here at the bottom, all three of these words, which are the plural genitive forms, masculine, feminine, and neuter, are again all the same. So you can just remember that those all stay the same. And then these are the same. The dative masculine plural and the dative neuter plural are the same. And then just like in the singular, in the plural as well, the neuter nominative and the neuter accusative are the same. So that can help you memorize this. But not only that, the reason why you really want to learn this chart is because there are a lot of other words in Greek that are going to follow the exact same pattern. For example, when we think of demonstrative pronouns, obviously we have the word this, but what's the opposite of this? That. And the word for that in Greek is ekinos. And the word ekinos follows the exact same pattern as the word outos. Because if we were to draw a chart of ekinos, which I've not drawn, but let's just do it verbally, it would be ekinos, ekini, ekino, ekinu, ekinis, ekinu, ekino, ekini, ekino, ekinon, ekinin, ekino, ekini, ekine, ekina. You get the idea. It follows the exact same pattern as this chart. Ekinon, 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 ekinis, ekines, ekinis, ekinus, ekinas, ekina. The endings are staying the same. But not only that, another really important chart to memorize, besides memorizing this chart of the demonstrative pronoun this, or in Greek, outos, this chart pretty much contains the chart for the word the within it. Watch this. If I just chop off the front of each word, I'm going to end up with the chart for the word the. Watch this. I just cut off all these twos off the front. Okay, let's get rid of all this stuff right here. Get rid of this stuff right here. And then get rid of this stuff right here. And then I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, and then get rid of this. And now, hopefully this should look familiar to you from all the lessons where we've talked about the word the. Hopefully you're starting to recognize some of these. And look, all I've done is erase things, except for the only one that I'm going to have to erase something extra on is this. I got to get rid of this S, don't I? Okay, now I've got the word the. And so it follows identical pattern as the word outos, as ekinos, etc. So then I would just have to accent these properly once I've chopped some things off here. Throw my accents on. Boom, boom, boom. Accents here. And then, let's see, like that, like that. Da-da, 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 da-da. This might be more like that. Okay, there you go. So now this is another chart that you should memorize, the word the. This is the word the in Greek. You got your masculines of the 4 different cases, singular, plural, feminine, neuter, etc. So that's why it's worth it to just bite the bullet. I know it's a pain in the neck to memorize this gigantic chart, but it's worth it because this is a pattern that's going to come up over and over again. And you need to know these endings of outos. You need to know all the different forms that you're going to find the word outos, ofti, tuto, and also with ekinos, and also with the word the. So not much to talk about with verse 2 that we haven't already covered in verse 1. That's why I wanted to spend this lesson just really driving in the importance of this word ούτος that's going to come up over and over again. Demonstrative pronoun, which can also act as an adjective in the case of, for example, ούτος ο άνθρωπος, this man, this whatever, this parable, anything you want. You're going to find that throughout the New Testament. Next lesson, we're going to get into verse 3 and learn a lot more.